Welcome back to the Links Golf Club podcast, everybody. A weekly conversation show about our wonderful club and the world of golf. I'm Gregory, as always, joined by Cooper and Chris. This week, we've got the longest day in golf. We have a recap at a beautiful golf course just south of Chicago that Chris and some other Links member played recently. And we have the Canadian Open coming up. We've got a whole bunch and more. So stick around. You're going to love the show. Gentlemen, how are we feeling? How's it going? What's new?
Feeling good, feeling good. Canadian Open, some good memories. Tackles on the 18th green, hoping to see some fireworks this week as well. And the mind can't help but get excited for U.S. Open coming up. So definitely feeling good. I see y'all got the shirt memo today. So one of those things about not being IRL in the office, we are aligned. The thinking is dialed. I love to see it.
Yeah. Chris, how you sleeping?
Not sleeping particularly well. A little cold going through the house, but I've gotten to play some good golf with the Lynx crew recently that we'll talk about. And hopefully the voice will hold up without too much coughing going on. Like to spare the audience of that one.
You
But
sound good though. It's like a
otherwise,
good low register. I like it.
yeah, like a guttural, kind of deep voice going. Hopefully people enjoy that. But regardless, excited to chat today.
Sweet. All right. Any announcements that people want to hear before we get started?
So I think a few things. We're going to have some more announcements coming up on the Hillcrest front. Some of those be tuned in next week. But for now, we're going to talk a little bit about signature events from the past week. We had our first of the year, but I think it's worth reiterating. We still have a few spots remaining at Tree Farm, which is going to be absolutely incredible. 2-day, 1-night trip coming later this year. It's kind of the only signature event with availability. And we've been a little remiss on this front, but it's worth a reminder that there's a handful of remaining spots for the Spay Bay events coming up this year, most notably the summer solstice in 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks time, which is kind of crazy. Which is going to be a ton of fun. And the crowd favorite Ryder Cup, I think there's like 5 spots left, 6 spots left, which is going to be an absolute blast. We've been talking a lot about the signature events and everything, with those rolling out, but worth reminding everybody about all the awesome Spay Bay events we have coming. And if you're aiming to get to either of those, you should be signing up quickly because Summer Solstice is coming up. Ryder Cup is going to be full soon. Cannot wait to get over there in a couple weeks. The same for you guys as well.
Definitely. 100 holes. The training has begun, Chris. I'm going to try to drag you out there like I did with Greg last year. He was tailing me along, but I think anybody who does over 36 is winning on that day out there. It's a good time.
I want to hold on a second. For the record, I wasn't tailing you as shit. We
No, you
both
were
did the
tailing
100
me.
holes.
No, I mean,
Huh?
those last few holes, like I was just trying to keep up with you. You were powering.
Oh, I
Yeah.
misunderstood. I thought you were like, oh yeah, you were dragging me or
No.
carrying me across the finish line.
No, you
No, I don't
carried
think
me
so.
across
But
the finish line. That was I was
no,
like, I
we
can't
equally
keep up
made it.
with you. You
We
got the
made it.
calves.
We had, our hands held right over the finish line. It
That's
was
right.
an equal thing. I just wanted to make sure the record was straight, that it wasn't the opposite.
Absolutely. No,
Okay,
it was good.
cool. Any announcements you have?
No, that's it. I mean, the events coming up are really great. If you've been subscribed to the Mulligan newsletter, you've seen some updates coming out. Hillcrest construction is in full bore. We've got some new green sites that have gone in. The practice area is under development. And we're looking forward to, on schedule kind of golf happening. Really excited about the member event happening out there later this year in Kansas City, and then, 2026 still on cue for the opening, but hope to see some golf balls flying out there as soon as possible. It's good vibes coming out from our U.S. course.
Sweet. And one last thing I'll say is Links Leagues new has launched. If you remember, get in there. We closed it out. I think the spring one ended 2 weeks ago. Gave out a ton of Links coin to the winners, but you now have the sort of prime of the summer to get out there. Stays dark or gets dark very late, so you have no excuses not to be able to get 8, 9 hole rounds in between now and end of July. So to learn more, go into the clubhouse, check out Links Leagues. If you're not a member, go to links.golf. And you can join and then participate, win some big prizes, compete with your fellow members. So as we get into the main section here, Chris, last week had a one of the signature events. You were talking about signature events earlier. I think first one of the year, right, at Olympia Fields, just south of Chicago. So how was it? Tell us what the day was like. You met some other members. What was the course like? Just give us the deets.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. We lucked out a little bit with the weather, I'd say, because there's been a lot of rain and such kind of all over the country, but particularly in the Northeast and Chicago. But we got a bluebird day in the morning and just an overcast day in the afternoon, and avoided the rain, which came in later that night. So that part was perfect. We talked a little bit about this year for signature events, we're trying to have a little more unique experiences, not just play around at some awesome courses, but have some more unique aspects, so multi-day trips and overnights and so on. But so for this one, we had a 36-hole day lined up, so we played both courses at Olympia Fields, South Course in the morning. We had a gracious host as a Links member who's a member at Olympia Fields, taking us around, showing us the ropes. Had lunch in the clubhouse there in the member grill, and then hit the North Course, which is the course that they played BMW Championship on, and a bunch of majors and USGA events on. We played that in the afternoon and hit the clubhouse again for some drinks in the evening. But absolutely awesome day. We had a kind of a great and very surprisingly kind of far-flung group coming in. I was expecting most people coming from Chicago or the Midwest, but we had good Chicago contingent, and then we had people coming in from Arizona, Atlanta, some from the Northeast, DC. So we had people coming in from all over. Probably speaks to just how much people revere the course and kind of all the history there and everything else. But yeah, it was absolutely incredible day. Awesome kickoff to the signature event series for the year, I'd say. And obviously really looking forward to the next ones coming up. We got Bayonne coming up later this month in the New York area, which is always a hit, always a crowd favorite. Yeah, overall, awesome start. Really cool, kind of unique experience to get to play both. And it's cool. One of the, I'd say, kind of most unique or interesting things of the day, not just playing the courses, but like when you're roaming the clubhouse there, you see all of the memorabilia and all the pictures and gear and everything from all the events that have been played there, which is pretty cool to see. There are the 2 BMW championships recently, but then like Bryson won his USAM there in 2015, and so got all the pics of Bryson and everything, which is kind of funny to look at that and then see how much both Bryson has changed and the golf world has changed since then. But kind of cool to see all that stuff. And it's not just those, there's the USGA events. We've had a bunch of LPGA events there and everything. So pretty cool to see all the history, kind of right there in person. It's really neat.
Sweet. If you had to kind of split, you had 10 rounds at the 2 courses, what would the breakdown be for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. The North is definitely more challenging. And I guess kind of, more kind of PGA Tour setup or what have you. But I thought both courses were kind of equally interesting, honestly. And I'm not like a high level golfer or anything, right? So it's not like I need the really high challenge of something that's really gonna test my game or whatnot to get on the North Course. So I'd probably split it evenly. Like the South Course had some really interesting holes, great greens. Also played really well on the front 9, like the first kind of 11 or 12 holes on the South Course. So that probably helps my recollection
Always
of
does.
the course itself. Yeah. Yeah, actually had 3 birdies in the first 10 holes, which is kind of wild.
Nice.
At least for me. But no, I mean, I thought the course was interesting. We talked about it as a group there a bit, but and Ted, who's hosting us there, plays it a ton, is saying that, I think he kind of feels the same way. It's like the South course is kind of an awkward routing, perhaps, and maybe a little more mismatched in some of the holes or whatever. But I don't know, kind of view that as nitpicking. I thought both courses overall were really great. And actually, it's kind of interesting the history of the courses. Like, I think they used to have, it's either 4 or 5 courses there way back in the day. If you're going back to like, I think pre-World War II times, and then like when the war came and everything, I think that's the point at which they had to consolidate and sell off some land or whatever. But so the South course is an amalgamation of holes from like 3 of the courses that were on that land, and then the North course, I guess, is intact from what it was back in like the 20s, 30s, 40s. And I guess that's why it's a little bit of a hodgepodge, unique routing or whatever. But still awesome experience. Still really cool to see. Still, both courses were a ton of fun to play, and awesome to get the experience, and all the Lynx members to have the experience to do that, get it all in one day.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned what's coming up next. What signature events are coming up?
So we've got Bayonne coming up, Bayonne Golf Club in New York City. If you haven't seen it, go, look at some pics on Instagram or something. A really unique spot to play. It's right on New York Harbor. So you get views of, at various points in the round, of the Manhattan skyline, as well as like big loading dock cranes and stuff right next to you while you're playing, and all of that. But an amazing course as well while you're playing it. So that's going to be a ton of fun. We've had events there in the past years, and they always sell out really quickly, and everyone raves about them. So really excited to do that one. And then we have our Arbor Links event coming up right adjacent to our Hillcrest member event in Kansas City later in September. And then we already mentioned the Tree Farm later this year. We're going to be doing a 2-day, one night overnight in the cottages on site. Again, a really kind of unique, awesome experience that, you've been on golf Twitter or golf social media, you've probably seen a ton of pictures and people raving about the course there. It's one of the most highly rated, most talked about new courses of the past 5 years or so. So really excited to see all of those coming up later this year.
And spoiler alert, but its owner also recently qualified for the U.S. Open, which is pretty exciting. Sweet. Well, Chris, let's stay with you. Let's talk about, people have been asking Hillcrest, sort of what's happening with construction, what's expected next. Just give us an update there.
Yeah, I'll talk about it a little, and then save my voice for later in the podcast, maybe. But yeah, Coop mentioned it up front, but we're basically in the thick of it now with construction and everything. So we've shared some of these pictures in the Mulligan and in Discord and everything, but versus when we were out there, when we're the 3 of us out there, kind of right after the announcement, that was like very beginning of March, I think. So 3 months. In that time, everything's now looking different. Both, all the grass is green, but also a ton of construction happening. When we were there earlier, the site was cleared and a bunch of trees, were removed and all of that. So it was looking different than last year. But now, there's really, we're in the thick of it. So greens are under construction, with 4 of them already complete. The practice area, which is going to be kind of one of the, biggest new things, one of the biggest developments of the site, that's all like cleared, and the dual-sided tees, ready to be, or constructed and leveled and all that. The practice greens and everything, the short game area, putting greens and all of that. So everything on kind of the east side of the property is going strong, and it's very cool to see. So I know we're gonna be having some more content, sharing more photos and videos of everything going on there. But suffice to say, there's a lot happening right now, and we're kind of at the beginning of that journey, or maybe in the middle of that journey now. So it's fun to be in it and see some of these things that we'll see come to life later this year and next year when the course opens. But a lot going on. We'll have more coming out for everyone to see and absorb later. But pretty cool to see all of it begin in earnest. At this point.
Absolutely. The pictures look great. I mean, it's kind of funny just how different green grass looks just because of the season, right? That is on any golf course, but starting to see some of the greens take shape, it is really exciting. So if you haven't checked those out, check out those. Make sure you're getting the mulligan. Make sure you're looking at us on social. Let's talk a little bit pro golf. So, scrappy upstart, Ben Griffin won again. He came from behind. Just kidding. Scottie Scheffler just absolutely destroyed the field. It wasn't even really ever close at any point. If you're a fan of greatness and legacy, you're probably really excited. If you're a fan of parody, you're probably kind of pissed. But I do want to shout out Ben Griffin, though, because he did end up getting second. He's been on something of a run recently, and he's now up to seventh on Ryder Cup points. So he wouldn't auto-qualify if it ended today, but he'd be pretty hard to keep out, I think, at this point, based on how he's playing. So we'll see how he does over the course of the next couple of months, but it's exciting to see sort of the emergence of a new name a little bit and another person to look for on the leaderboard. But, ho-hum, Scottie went out and was a pretty boring 3.87 strokes gained overall. He was first tee to green, third off the tee, second in approach, fourth around the greens, and then just like 35th putting. Seemed like just like one of those rounds where you're just like striping it. You're probably getting the ball really close and maybe missing a couple of medium-sized putts. I didn't look deeply into the stats there, but this is a pretty normal round for Scottie. He's top 5 in almost everything. Sometimes he'll get hotter with the putter, sometimes he won't, but it doesn't really matter. He's now gaining almost a full stroke per round over the second best player in the world, according to Data Golf's index, which is Rory, which is pretty crazy. And his current peak, so Data Golf has this interesting thing. First, they sort of calculate a Data Golf index, and that index is sort of, it's complicated, and I'm kind of stupid, but it's a number of points, and just think of the higher the number, sort of the better, right? We'll just keep it there. And then they calculate that basically like a peak, like a moment in time and sort of your apex mountain of your golf. And Tiger in September of 2000 was 3.77, and Scottie right now is 3.09, which is second all time. And he is closer to Tiger's September 2000 peak than Rory is to him right now, which is pretty insane to put it all in some historical context there. Any thoughts on the Memorial? Did y'all watch it? Anything else on the leaderboard that stood out to you? Anything interesting? Any more Scottie fluffing? What's on y'all's mind with the Memorial?
Yeah, I did not catch most of the tournament. I was watching social media updates about the leaderboard, and the best representation is kind of that The Office meme where the lady sneaks up on Dwight, and he's like, it's Scottie sneaking up on the field every Saturday and Sunday. It just kind of seems to happen. He just shows up and starts shooting the lights out. It almost seems inevitable at this point. Like, you get to try to, this field's kind of boring on Thursday or whatever. We'll see how it happens, and then he seems inevitable. It just sneaks up on everybody.
Yeah, I watched a little bit, but yeah, Scottie's kind of making it boring by just running away with everything. I mean, it was a little close going into Sunday, but I ended up actually watching more of the Women's Open because there was at least a little drama on the back nine, or with Nelly chasing and seeing if she could make it a race, and Aaron Hills was looking great and all that. So I ended up watching more of that, but was monitoring the Memorial. Just Scottie has a way of just like grinding everybody down and then winning in kind of not spectacular fashion, just because he just keeps playing really solid golf all the time. But that's what you got to do if you're going to be like an all-time great, which he is at this point. But I will say it's funny, just like how much the narratives can change in a month's time or 2 months' time. Whenever we were talking post Masters, or it's like uh, Rory's winning in really good form, wins the Masters. Can Scottie even win a non-Masters major? Blah blah blah, and then rallies off some awesome performances and a major of his own. And now it's like completely flipped, right? We haven't even really thought about Rory that much over the past month or so. So funny how that all can change going into the next major of the year.
Yeah, we've talked about Ben Griffin on this podcast more than we have Rory. But Rory is in Canada right now. He's traveled up to the 51st state, and he's playing at the RBC, which is always fun. National Opens are great. Like, I think one thing, if you're just getting into watching golf or you watch golf for a long time, it's a tough sport to watch because it just sort of feels like it never ends. And you have the majors, which feel really, really important, and then you have maybe a couple other events you tune into, unless you're just an absolute sicko. But I think one of the things that I would recommend to people is sort of picking like your pet events or a style of event. Like I talked about how much I enjoy watching like what's the TPC Louisiana? I'm forgetting what that event is even called, which is ironic because I'm saying it's one of my favorite events. But like, I love team golf, or I love match play, or pick a lane. Another lane you could certainly pick is just national opens, right? And if we were doing like a draft on a style of event, I think it might be the first overall pick because not only do you get the U.S. Open, you get the Open, you get the Scottish Open. You even get sleepers like the Australian Open, even though the whole field doesn't get down there. And then you get the Canadian Open, which is happening this week. So Rory's at plus 450. I think probably a lot of that is because Scottie's not there. And then there's a pretty wide gap in the opening odds. Ludwig is at plus 1,400. Corey Connors is at plus 2,000. And then another kind of space to watch is you get 41 players at plus 100,000. Including Mike Weir and Kevin Kistner. So usually it's kind of crazy. And I don't know if this is a bug, but usually when you look at the odds on FanDuel, I just naturally always go to the bottom of the list just to see who's there. And I think we saw Kuchar on there a little while ago. I've never seen this many players. Like, it's almost just like, I don't know, it's in a different country. Let's just group a bunch of people at the bottom. So I'll be tuning in. I always love these sort of events because they oftentimes do kind of silly stuff. Like, they definitely play up the Canadian angle. They play at a lot of different venues, unlike the U.S. Open and the Open in the U.K. I think they played at something like 48 venues, and this is 2 years in a row they've played at a new one. So sounds like an interesting place. A lot of people don't know about it at this point as far as it being on this stage. So it's fun to watch a new golf course that you know nothing about, and pretty light weekend for me. So I'll definitely be tuning in. Any thoughts on either Canada in general or the Canadian Open from the two of you boys?
I would like to see the data on how often a Canadian wins the Canadian Open, and like, are they getting a premium on betting or anything like that? I feel like the patriotism you kind of lock in those situations. So that'd be kind of what I was looking for. Maybe I'll look into some of the historical data there. But love the Canadian angle. Love our kind neighbors to the north. We have a lot of great Canadian Links members. So also, fun fact: highest number of golfers per capita of any country on the planet, despite the colder weather. So there's your Canada fact. Looking to see some Mounties and some O Canadas this weekend.
Right. I need to see some footnotes, some primary sources on that data, but I'll trust it for now, Coop.
We're good. Somebody in chat,
good fun fact.
Drop a link. Grok it. ChatGPT.
I'm looking out for some big news to be dropped today because, like, the last 2 years in a row, I want to say the Canadian Open's gotten completely steamrolled by some big news dropping on Wednesday of the tournament and then like being the talk instead of the tournament for the whole week. I think it was the original LIV announcement, and then that would have been more than 2 years ago, and then like the framework agreement, I want to say, or like the merger announcement, which didn't happen, of course. So today's the day apparently to like drop big golf news. So my ears are open. I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen this year to screw over the Canadian Open this time.
It's like the Nick Castellanos, the golf version of Nick Castellanos. Whenever he hits a home run, something bad always happens. It's like Uh-oh. Yeah, something's coming up with the Canadian Open. Makes sense. And in my very half-assed internet research, I think famously last year a Canadian won, or 2 years ago a Canadian won, and from at least what I've seen with just looking at this while you were talking, I think the last one to do it was like 1912, 1914. So there was a huge gap there, but certainly you have some Canadians in the mix at the top, and I would love to see a Canadian win this event. So let's look out for it. Let's also talk. I think it's very rare that big things kind of come out of nowhere that don't seem sort of manufactured. Like what I mean by that is, all of us thinking about golf all day. TGL was a big deal, but it was sort of like it was invented from scratch and marketed to us and something that we were supposed to pay attention to. I looked yesterday and I can't really remember when the longest day stuff started. It just kind of feels like it's always been talked about that way, but I know it hasn't because it also seems super recent. But it's something to definitely circle on the calendar. It's our national open, right? So you have the U.S. Open coming up. And in a single day, 10 sites, this was on Monday, 10 sites had 732 golfers competing for 47 spots in the U.S. Open. The USGA, the official name for this is final qualifying, but the Golf Channel seems to really be investing in this. I mean, they had basically wall-to-wall coverage all day. You could turn it on in the morning and pretty much watch a very wide array of people trying to qualify for this major. I think was one of the things that makes it such a special event. And I think it honestly is probably, if I have to think about it, my favorite major, which might be controversial. But part of the reason why is because of stuff like this. And so you had, we mentioned earlier, a fellow golf course owner, Zach Blair, earned a spot, which is really exciting. So we're going to need to see a Linkstown member, earn a spot next year. A 17-year-old Mason Howell shot a 63-63 to qualify, which is just absolutely amazing. But then you also, you have big names who might not have an exemption also needing to qualify. So we have two guys that were on the Ryder Cup team in Rome, Ricky Fowler and Max Homa, both attempting to qualify just like everybody else, next to a dentist and an accountant. And neither of them were able to get it done. Homa had a just soul-crushing, it wasn't an easy birdie, to be fair. It's not like he had a tap-in birdie and he missed it, but he had like a 10-footer on 18, and if he made that putt, he would have qualified. And he unfortunately ended up missing it, and then was in a three-way playoff with Ricky, Max, and Cam Young, who ended up eventually winning. But like Patrick Harrington also was trying to qualify, Matt Kuchar and Eric Cole. None of those guys did. A UPS driver who's a big story to start the day. Like one of the big angles that people take is, who are these sort of normal guys who are attempting to qualify? And sort of for the very beginning, journalists are looking through and they're like, oh, there's a UPS driver. Let's circle that story. Let's talk about it. There's a dentist. Let's talk about that. And the UPS driver would have qualified, but didn't sign his card or didn't sign it correctly, and something happened and ended up not qualifying for the U.S. Open, which I don't know. I can't really think of anything else more soul-crushing than that for me, let alone for him. So it just, I don't know how you would explain that to someone who doesn't play golf. Like there's no other sport in which that kind of thing matters. Like it's not like Joe Montana in the late 80s went out and threw for 325 yards and then he didn't sign his stat sheet correctly and then didn't get the Super Bowl MVP. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Chris Webber calling a timeout when he didn't have one in the final seconds, maybe.
That's a great comp because it's a stupid thing that has no impact on the game, and it did. Right. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, okay. So that's one. I'd love to know others. Let us know in the comments, but that's a great one. Yeah.
I do. Go ahead, Coop. Go ahead.
I was thinking baseball. It's like hitting a grand slam and getting ejected afterwards, and like now we're taking that off the board. It's crazy.
Yeah, or you you hit a grand slam and then you didn't touch second base or something, then it gets canceled.
Yeah,
another great example.
That's good technicality.
I'm really big on the
technicalities. You are an accountant, so I think that probably
but so overall though, I do love the U.S. Open in general, but the whole longest day thing. It's
Yeah,
like I love all the stuff that comes out of it.
it's
Just
great.
the whole setup, first of all, that like anybody can qualify. It's all merit based. It's that's just so amazing. Both this and then the Open Championship later, like last year, seeing Justin Rose do it, and then get second, incredible. But there's always awesome stories that come out of it, and it's also great to see like some of these guys who are pros or have made it already, right? Basically still grinding and being like, hey, this matters so much that there's all this stuff on Twitter earlier this week of like Max Homa carrying his own bag and all these things. Really cool to see. I mean, the fact that I think he was actually in a 5-way playoff, not a 3-way, but I think it was like him, Ricky, Eric Cole, Cam Young, who won it, and then one other guy who I'm blanking on. But like, that's like that could be a featured group in a PGA Tour event. But they were all grinding it out in playoff holes just to try and make it like absolutely incredible. I don't know if you see the shot that Zach Blair hit to win in his playoff
Mm-hmm.
to make
Mm-hmm.
it. Absolutely sick. I think it was like the fourth hole of the playoff. Stuck it to like 1 foot. It has to be like the best feeling in the world. You just played 40 holes that day, and then you just like absolutely stick it where you don't even need to worry about the putt. Um, Absolutely incredible, and the fact that you see some of this, some of these storylines coming out of it. Uh, I did see apparently the dentist isn't actually a dentist; he's like a dental influencer or something. Maybe a little misleading.
I think that was a tweet that someone was casting shade because I did some research
Okay.
on this and he
Okay.
actually like he has a website, and so one of my things was going to be that an actual dentist, and I think he is, unless he you know is super deep in the dark webs of influencing, that like he's been able to create all of this notoriety around himself in his local market. But I just think I find it so funny that let's say he's your dentist and you don't know that he's great at golf. And he's had a very interesting story, right? It's not like he's never played golf before, decided to play golf yesterday. I mean, you hear this a lot. There's always every year there's someone who was a great amateur golfer, played college golf, wasn't quite able to make it on tour, so then went on. I mean, look, Ben Griffin is kind of the story too, which would makes Ben Griffin really exciting, right? They go on and kind of start a career and then they make their way back into competitive golf somehow. And so that's very much Matthew Voigt's story. But I just find it really funny that like if you didn't know that he's a great golfer, and that you go in on Monday for an appointment with him, and he's like, "How was your weekend?" And you just like you're like arrogantly talking about that like 82 you shot or whatever, and he's just now playing in the U.S. Open. So
Or
it
maybe you had an appointment with him for next Thursday and now it's canceled because he's
it's a
playing in
good
the
point.
US Open
Good
and you're
point.
pissed.
Yeah,
Cuts both
who
ways.
pays for that deposit? Uh, Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, I mean it is very cool to see because it just a lot of people ran with this obviously every year, but it's like there's no real other sport where this is possible. I mean, there's entire Hollywood movies that center around the concept that the sort of normal person would be able to play and compete in a professional sporting event, and it's super cool to think that any one of us could do it, even though obviously that's not true. But another thing I want to point out, we talked about last week about how I think the Tour Championship should be run, and you mentioned just like 40 holes of golf and how good that feel. Like I want to see great golfers playing more golf on single days. We used to do it more. We still do it in the AM stuff. We need an event in the PGA Tour in which they play 36 holes in a day. It needs to happen. I want to see the grind a little bit more. So
I
anything
have
else? I mean, go ahead.
I have two things I would love to know more about this day that I don't. One is, so there were a zillion stories, headlines written about Max Homa carrying his own bag,
Mhm.
but plenty of other people have have caddies, have people carrying their bag. So I want to know why Max was carrying his own bag and didn't have his caddy. He of all people should be able to pay somebody
I think I
to carry
read
the bag.
a quote from him on this, and he said that it was kind of a symbolic thing of like it's up to me. The whole weight's on his shoulders, and he had to do it like himself to make it happen. And I think it was kind of like
Okay.
a decision he made to mentally go out there and just put up the blinders and try to lock in and get it done. So I think it was
Wild.
interesting, especially on a day when you're playing 36. You might want that weight off your shoulders a little bit,
Yeah,
right? Like
totally.
you
Or
may
like
have
someone to
won it,
read a putt with you
right?
on 18 that you might miss to go into a playoff and miss the tournament.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Maybe.
I love the narrative, but I think also this morning he announced he's breaking up with his caddy. So I think there's probably something a little bit more to it than that. Let's see if he carries it. Damn it, he's not going to be at the U.S. Open. That was not intended to be mean, but I wish he was going to be at the U.S. Open and see. Has it ever happened at a major? Someone carry their own bag? Has that ever happened? I think that's another. We need a research analyst or someone.
I've
we
seen
could ask.
stories of people pulling in like a last minute
Yeah,
random or like literally someone from the crowd or whatever. I don't know because they always have the staff bags too, right? Where it's like
heavy.
it's not a carry bag.
yeah.
It would be a big ordeal to pull.
Is there anything in the rules that you can't just like get a Sunday bag and just like go out there? Do you have to have a caddy? Is that
Sure, back
I
in the day
don't
that was
know.
happening. Yeah,
Yeah, it can't be an advantage, right? So I'd have to imagine you could, but I have no clue.
It'd be fun. Another kind of breaking news story. So I don't know how much there is to talk about this on, but this morning woke up to the news that uh, famous for two things: one, winning the USAM last year, and secondly, taking a leak in Rays Creek at the Masters this year. Josele Ballester is going to live, which is kind of the first name that we've seen go to live recently. It's kind of the last time, at least I remember, I mean, since Rom, that like someone that you expect to be a good golfer goes to live. I think it's good for U.S. Ryder Cup chances in general because hopefully he goes over there and is just forgotten about, and that takes another European off the board. But any thoughts? This stuff has been talked about endlessly, but does this change anything about the momentum where it stands? If we're talking about where Liv is now, if they're recruiting a young amateur golfer, does it surprise you? Just any thoughts on that? I know it's fresh news.
I have two thoughts. One is there's something poetic or symbolic about, the guy that pissed in Rays Creek going to live and, I don't know. There's something there. I don't know what it is, but there's something. Um, and then the second thing is I don't think it's really huge news in and of itself necessarily, or I wasn't like looking forward to watching Ballester play on the PGA Tour or something. He's even though he is a good player, there's like plenty of other guys that
Yeah.
are that caliber, I would say. But it is interesting that there's at least some activity on the signing front, right? Because to me, the bigger story is all these initial guys that were signed, their like renewals or next
Yep.
contracts are coming up. So for quite a long time, like you said, there hasn't been anything happening. It's like new players are signed, and it kind of it calls into question, well, like what's going to happen next? Is anything going to happen next? So
Mhm.
now this is at least like a sign of life, I guess, that there's going to be some activity. This is a new player, so perhaps we should be thinking that okay, perhaps more new players are going to get signed, or they're going to be putting some thought into uh, future contracts for all these big guys that they did sign and everything else. Um, so that felt to me like bigger news rather than, or the bigger implication rather than the news itself.
hmm Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, especially the way that sort of NIL has changed. College basketball, I think, probably has had the biggest impact of this, and sort of the free agency model in college sports. It is kind of, to your point, interesting that a young player who would expect to be on the PGA Tour probably the next year or so is sort of given the option on an open market between the two tours, is choosing live. Obviously, money has a lot to do with that. But then, to your point, there might very well be a vacuum in the next 12 to 24 months of live players. And if more of these younger guys who are sort of seeing what other college athletes are doing and getting their bag, and there's no judgment on any of that, uh, it could be interesting to see like what happens to Blade Brown. What happened? Some of these guys that we've seen just crush it at the collegiate ranks. Maybe the entire Auburn team goes there. I don't know. But it is an interesting storyline to watch for sure. Coop, any thoughts on that?
Well, it's another move for Spain to live, right? We've got Sergio, you've got John Rahm, and now perhaps that's an angle that's happening here. I think there is some poetry to it with the Race Creek incident at the Masters, but I think we'll see how it plays out, and the ending of the contracts I think is going to be the biggest story, and how all of that shakes out with signings and everything. If LIV becomes like the feeder league or some type of amateur league, what does that mean for the future of these players? If a lot of young players decide to make that leap and go to LIV, are they banned for life from the PGA Tour? Like, can you graduate or can you shift, right? Like, I think we have to figure out where those boundaries exist. At least if I were an M coming up out of college and were much better at golf than I am, that would be something I'd consider. Take a check early, but what does that mean? Can I play on the Champions Tour when I turn 70? I don't know if these 20-year-olds are thinking about that, but something I would consider.
Yeah, it has to be like, look, I can get $20 million guaranteed no matter what happens, and if I get hurt or flame out or don't get my card, who cares? It is interesting, the juxtaposition of when you hear like Dustin Johnson, who sort of famously was on Pat McAfee, I think last week, or he's like, I was listening to a Laying Up podcast and they were talking about it, just like how insane it is when asked to market LIV and why fans should watch. And they're like, I don't know, like we just don't have to try very hard, and we get to travel to cool places, and like our kids can be inside the ropes, and it's a really chill vibe. So it's interesting, like most of the, I think, older guys who have already achieved notoriety, who've already earned a shit ton of money, are kind of looking at LIV as like a retirement off-ramp in some ways. But to see a new guy go, it is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Chris, I interrupted you earlier. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think there is something to the Spanish angle. I mean, it probably played into his decision, right, going to Sergio's team and then having Rom there and everything, and also just their continued focus on international players, which makes sense, right? They have international events and all of that, so there's some logic to that too. But yeah, I agree with you, Greg. It is, I would think with NIL where it is today, you would think young guys would be less apt to jump for a paycheck because they've already been getting paychecks, basically, right? Like, it's not like there's already a level of security there, financial security. And so it's not like, okay, get my check and then I don't have to, I was destitute before as a poor college kid, and now I'm, now I have my check that I'm set for life or whatnot. Like it's not that stark of a change now. So you think that would affect people's decision making, but also, I mean, it is still a lot of money, and it is still like kids at the end of the day. So who knows where it'll go in the future.
Yeah. Speaking of young champions, Charlie Woods next to go to LIV? No.
Oh yeah, I actually just deleted it from the list. I was gonna say over under number of majors, non-Masters majors that Charlie Woods wins. I actually don't want to talk about it because it's like, I think it's like so much unfair pressure to put on him. But he did win his first tournament. I just think that, like, I don't want to contribute to the absolute hellscape that is going to become Charlie Woods' expectations. I mean, if you think about what it's been with like Bronny, it's going to be 100x worse for Tiger. Y'all can talk about it. I'll mute. But we have a new segment here. It's kind of like, if you're a listener of the All In podcast, they have the Science Corner, where the most of the guys talk about now politics and investment, whatever, and then at the very end, the like best part of the show is Science Corner, where David Freeberg just absolutely drops alpha on everything that's happening that's going to contribute to the evolution of our society from a science perspective. And Cooper, you're David Freeberg here. You're going to talk about crypto. So what's going on in the crypto world? You got a couple stories you want to share here?
Yeah. Happy to do it. Just give you all a price update. ETH is at 2,600. Bitcoin's at 104, dipping a little bit today. Solana at 155. Biggest news, I think, across crypto narratives is the Pump.Fun token announcement, dropping $1 billion of coins at a $4 billion valuation. Shout out to Mike Dudas and Six Man for that. That's pretty cool. But it's a hot button issue, right, in crypto. Pump.Fun, accusations of extraction, But if you look at last cycle, OpenSea raised a $4 billion at a $13 billion valuation, right? Love to get your guys' thoughts. Is this a bullish thing? Does this mean that we're not topped yet for this cycle? Like, how do you guys read into this token drop?
I mean, I feel like a lot of it'll hinge on how it goes, so that piece of it's TBD. And I candidly haven't looked a ton into like the structure of it, or kind of how it's being laid out. Um, but in general, I think it's exciting, and it's more activity, and certainly big dollar amounts, and Pump's been doing, you know, regardless of your stance on whether it's good or bad, or the platform or whatever else, they've been doing a ton of volume, ton of revenue. Like they've have a lot of eyeballs attached to it, and certainly been successful from that point. So like both seeing a continued evolution there, and then also like kind of a new, I guess, a new structure, a new way of thinking about how they're raising money, or just kind of doing the corporate evolution is interesting and cool to see. And we'll see kind of how it all goes down, and how it all evolves from there. But certainly seems like a sign of life, and kind of an exciting thing to be happening in the ecosystem.
Greg, have you ever used Pump.Fun? Have you launched a coin? Have you purchased a coin on Pump.Fun?
Uh, I definitely haven't launched a coin. I'm trying to think if I've ever bought one. I don't think so. Um, I'm just kind of old, man. Like I kind of stick to the basics. I understand what it is, and I think it is cool. I mean, I think at the end of the day, now we have been in this industry, some of us longer than others, but let's just say since Linkstyle started, for you know I can't do math, over 3 years, right? And
Mhm.
I think there's always been these cycles that are very sort of trend based, where somebody hits on something, everybody follows until it fails, and then another thing hits, and then everyone follows until it fails, and it's just sort of repeat, rinse, repeat. Technology's the same exact way, right? Like if you look at AI right now, I think I was listening to something or reading something. It was talking about one of kind of the best ways to look at where most of the energy is in any given time for startups is just looking at the composition of Y Combinator applications. Y Combinator is a incubator slash investment, whatever, blah blah blah. If you haven't heard about it, you can look at it. But each year there's applicants, and it changes, but some number of them are then accepted, and then they get investment, and then they get like a 12-week program. And I'm butchering a lot of those details, but I didn't write them down, and I don't remember. So if you look at the composition of the applicants, it's very much a barometer of sort of what founders think are important at any given time, but it also is sort of people capitalizing on a zeitgeist, right? So if you look at kind of the early years, it was a lot of web service companies. Then it became everything was an app, and then it became kind of like year one is 20% or apps, and then it gets to 100%, and then at some point you start to see, okay, now it's gig economy companies. Okay, now it's AI companies, and that's sort of recently we've sort of reached somewhat of a peak on. I think they said that some nearing 100% of the applicants to Y Combinator this past year were AI companies, right? So I say that because it is interesting. I think what Pump.Fun has done. I think it's an interesting product. I think it's a new product in a way that people are able to capitalize on the attention generated from the content that they create via advertising dollars that, funnel into a few companies. So it's interesting to be able to play with your ability to gain attention, whether that be through social media or content or your own sort of reputation, and have other people be able to benefit from that. Obviously, a lot of the tokens go to zero. A lot of them get propped up over time. There's all this other stuff that comes around it. But I do think one of the promises that we've always had in crypto is that people, like sort of the democratization of success in this sort of new world of the internet, will look very different than the sort of concentration of capital to a few large companies in the last cycle of the internet. So Whether or not this makes sense specifically, I don't know, but I think Pump.Fun is interesting. And it's good to see a company that sort of stuck their neck out and did something different, continuing to get headlines and continuing to grow. And then it's sort of like, I think, enthuses everyone else in the industry when you see news like this. So that's my take.
Love it. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Cool to look at the big picture holistically and kind of how those cycles move. Um, Gonna be really cool to see how it plays out. So that's the Pump.Fun news. The other thing is kind of a pivot or relic from last cycle, the NFT side of things, where we like to live. Linksdown member, friend of the pod, OVOSF Rekt, launched a NFT drop in collaboration with OpenSea to sell their Rekt drinks, which are sparkling water drinks. They minted a Shipwrecked grapefruit raspberry sparkling water. It sold out in about 16 minutes globally as an NFT drop, and then the holders can burn these NFTs for 24 packs of the sparkling water. Mint price was about $75. Pretty good price for a pack of bevies. But really, really cool to see NFTs being used in like a novel way in 2025. So shout out to Rekt, shout out to Ovi for doing that drop and the sellout. I'm still looking to get my hands on one of the 3 flavors that they have out now and give them a try. But yeah, definitely fun to see NFTs being used out here like this and seeing a sellout on OpenSea.
Is it a miss to not have one of the flavors be mint? Is that a miss from Rick?
I think the R&D team is gonna queue off of that. That's a good idea.
Please do. These are free ideas that anyone can take. Cool. Well, thanks for that. Love it. That was by popular demand. So if you want to keep hearing the crypto corner, let us know. We're gonna get out of here in a second. Just on behalf of Cooper and Chris, I want to thank you for listening or watching today. Obviously, doing the live pod, moving around some kind of dates and trying to find the right slot for it. We're gonna try to go to a regularly scheduled programming next week. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you'll get notified when we go live. Make sure you're in the Discord. Make sure if you're a member, you have gone and linked your email to your Clubhouse account so that you'll get the Mulligan each week, where we always put news first, and that is always the best place to see what's happening. But to all the listeners, again, we really want your feedback on how the pod's going. Let us know in Discord, the YouTube comments of either topics or guests or things you like or things you don't like. And again, just don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you can get notified on any platform. Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube. We are anywhere that you go so that you can always get the weekly news and what's happening at Linksdown, the world of golf. So Cooper and Chris, appreciate y'all taking the time today, and we'll see you next week.
Gonna be a good one next week. See ya.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.